And nobody wants to work for a pushy or a spiteful or a bitchy boss. Now, on the other side, when women show their feminine side, listening and empathizing and understanding, they're perceived as weak or too soft. So hold that thought just for a second, just to digress for a second. I find that analysis particularly interesting in light of a Fortune magazine article that I read just a couple of weeks ago, and I'll read this verbatim to you. Based on an Accenture study of 200 top executives on the subject of preparedness for digital transformation, the study concluded that 89% of our current executives were prepared in terms of business, finance, science, or technology skills, all left brain skills, but were markedly short on the required brain skills of creativity, empathy, tuition, and openness necessary to manage that change. Those skills sound familiar? So where do you suppose we could ever find people like that? This is a dichotomy that's a no-win issue for women, and one that's too often dismissed by by men as a women's perception issue, and one that they, and only they, the women themselves, can reconcile. And this is where men have it completely wrong. This is a phenomenon called gender stereotyping, and it's a form of bias. Whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's still gender bias. And gender bias, like racial bias or age bias or any other form of bias, leads to discrimination which affects all of us, men and women, and has no legitimate place in the work environment or at home, for that matter. When we're at work, our leaders want our teams to be operating at full capacity and efficiency, right? But employees, whether they're male or female, we can't do this if we're hamstrung by bias or discrimination. So understanding bias, particularly unconscious bias, is the first step in unbinding the shackles that hold back women and men from performing at their peak. And you know, it's interesting to me, I mentioned I go to a lot of conferences, I speak at a lot of conferences, and I don't think I've been to one in the last 3 years that hasn't mentioned the shortage of talent in procurement and supply chain as a perennial topic of interest and a really pervasive concern, and almost an irreconcilable issue, because it's always there and it never seems to go away. And I think that part of the solution may be putting the right talent in the right places. My personal goal and a leading objective of our organization, the Global Council of the Advancement of Women in Procurement, is to see properly legislated gender parity and voluntary gender parity become a reality, at least before the end of my working life. And I can tell you, I don't want to work all that much longer. I'm getting up there. So one of the things that we're doing and the council is supporting is an initiative that I'm announcing here in Los Angeles for the first time. Do you have the logo there? Can you bring that up? That is not the logo.
Beautiful.
It can be. I'm not sure if it'll work.
It's coming.
It's coming. You're a tech guy here.
It's coming. There it goes, I think. No?
Is it showing? You had it for a second. Back to that one. All right, well, that's our new logo. Anyway, it's called the, now you can read it. It's the 50, 50, and 5 program. What that means is that we want to recognize as corporations that have made a formal voluntary pledge to reach documented gender pay parity and 50% women in all key management and board roles within 5 years. There's no reason why this can't be done, but we need to put a stake in the ground. We need to put a goal there. If you don't make it, there's no punishment for not making it, but there's no excuse for not trying either. As the famous boxer Muhammad Ali said, the time for talking is over. So to the men and women in this room, in our profession, I say, today, let us be proud of our women in procurement supply chain. And this evening, let's celebrate their achievements, but we must continue to demand more sooner, to demand parity now. There's every reason to do this and no reason not to. We can do much better. We must accelerate change. Things do need to change, and that change needs to begin here and now. Thank you so much for listening. And now, the real fun, I'd like to turn the program over to our panel moderator and her esteemed panel, Sarah Scott. So Sarah?
Thank you. I feel so fancy with a podium. So, hello Southern California. Again, a big thank you to CBS and the entire team for hosting us. It's a lovely venue. So, the theme of the panel today is about branding. And we're going to talk about two subjects that fall within branding. The first is how to build your personal brand as a leader in the procurement industry. And the second thing we're going to talk about is how to build a brand for your procurement organization. How many of you, when you talk to people who aren't from the industry and you ask, or they ask what you do and you say they're in procurement, and they're like, what's that? I have no idea. What does procurement mean? What does procurement do? So helping you get tips. Oh, is my mic not working? All right, are we good now? Yes. Helping you get valuable takeaway tips tonight that you can implement to help build a really, really solid, positive brand for your procurement organization within your company. So with that, we are going to bring up 4 absolute superstars to have a really lively discussion about branding. And I want this to be really interactive, so don't be shy to ask questions, talk throughout. We want this to be super engaging. And this is also being live streamed globally. You'll see my little setup here. So we may be getting some live stream questions come in as well, and this will be nice. We'll have a video takeaway so people can learn and we can share and distribute to our networks what we talked about tonight. So with that, I'd like to bring my panel up to the front. We need some music for the thing.
Should we dance?
Yes. Dancing is welcomed.
Oh no, should have said that.
Okay, so we're going to start off, and I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, and then we have different questions prepared. All of them have very unique and diverse backgrounds. So I want to start off with Catherine, who flew in all the way from Chicago to be with us this evening. Yes. You can notice she doesn't have a jacket because this is really warm weather for her. So a little bit about Catherine, and for those of you who know me, I like to make things very fun and personal. So you're going to learn a little bit more about these ladies than you knew before. So a couple interesting facts about Catherine before she introduces herself is she can still do handstands. She loves the Oxford comma. And she's most creative when turning leftovers into gourmet creations. So Catherine, with that, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Sarah, thank you for inviting me.
And if you guys want to use your mics.
Can you hear me? Do I need to use my mic? Maybe. I can project a little bit more.
Okay.
Oh. Nice try.
We got to turn them on, I think.
Now is it working? No.
Okay, we're in business.
Fantastic. So I'm Catherine Balistreri, and I am the head of marketing for Proxima, and we are a procurement consulting firm. If you guys don't know us, we started in the UK, but have been in the US for a while with a growing and emerging brand, but also very well established. As Sarah said, I came in from Chicago, and I think you wanted to know also what's my brand? Is that one of the questions?
I'm going to kick off the first question
Great.
with you, Catherine. So what is your personal brand?
Yeah. So it feels like a good question to ask a marketer to start talking about what my personal brand is. So when I think about my personal brand, it's kind of hard to, or I think first, like, I think about my corporate brand all the time, right? What does it mean? What does it look like? What do we say? Who are we? And there are a lot of similarities between developing a corporate brand or your organizational brand and developing your personal brand. So when you look at developing a brand for your company, among other things, you think about what's our personality. So if my company, if Proxima were a person, what would that person be? What would that person's personality traits be? and what are our values? What do we care about? What do we care about as a company? What do our people care about? What drives them to be their most successful? So then I take that and apply it to what does that mean for me as a person? And I think it's about your story. So what's your history? What are your experiences? And how did that shape you, or how does that inform who you are now? Obviously, you have to leave, we're all growing, we're evolving, we're changing, so you have to leave room for that. But when you start kind of stripping back some of the layers, I feel like there are a couple of, you come to a couple of core fundamental truths about who you are. And for me, I think that's about honesty and transparency, about humility, and about authenticity. So when I think as a person, as I'm growing, there are a lot of other things around me. I'm having a lot of different kind of conversations. I'm engaging with a lot of different kind of people. But the core of who I am is always the same. And if I act in that way, if I engage in that way, then I know that that's my brand, that's who I am, and that's what I'm putting out into the world.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Next we have Terry. And Terry has some really interesting fun facts, things that we don't normally hear. So get ready. So during her early career with Blockbuster, she was able to hitch a ride in the Blockbuster blimp. Have any of you guys seen that before in events? Terry actually was in the blimp from the Oakland airport all the way down the bay and to the Golden Gate Bridge and back again. She was the only female bull rider in her high school rodeo association. Yeah, I think that absolutely deserves a round of applause. And I think this is the most daring of any of her three, is she actually lived with bears in Alaska for 5 days. What? You can do it too. So Terry, with that, can you introduce yourself to the group, and if you wouldn't mind grabbing Catherine's mic so we make sure the live stream can hear you okay.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm Terry Hertel. I currently work at Farmers Insurance over in Woodland Hills. I'm a senior category manager, and I have a team of strategic sourcing and procurement professionals that work for me, and we support IT. Prior to that, I have a very diverse background. Worked in many different categories and different industries. I've worked for the energy industry, oil and gas. I've worked for mining. I've also worked in financial insurance, and then early in my career, Blockbuster Video corporate. And that's where I got my start in supply chain and contracting, and it just grew from there. I've also had the privilege of working globally and traveling to different countries and working with different cultures and environments, which also was very rewarding, and I learned a lot.
And Terry and I both lived in the same town in Petaluma wine country. Right. So we have history. Right. All right, Terry, so your first question for the evening is, as a woman, why is branding particularly important, being a female in procurement?
Sure. Well, I think Michael touched on it in his intro. Women are an advantage. We start at a disadvantage. I did a little research, and what I came up with is pretty much repeating what was already said, that laws, cultures, religion, politics, we're all built upon a patriarchal foundation. So that sets women back at a disadvantage to begin with. So we're always struggling and working harder to make our way in a masculine world. And although laws and policies have been put in place to level the playing field and for everybody, not all those changes have been implemented yet everywhere. So I think that branding for women is another tool in our toolbox that we need to use, and it's a great tool to help us meet those challenges and get beyond them.
All right, thank you, Terry. Next, we have Miss Kimberly. Kimberly is a traveler. So she's Well, let's talk about your most challenging trip first. She has so many travel stories, I don't know where to start. So her most challenging yet rewarding trip was hiking the Inca Trail in Peru, correct? Her favorite place that she's ever been is Italy, and she aspires to learn Italian. Her and her hubby collect wine that they manage using a database. Little geek alert there. And she's been making homemade jam during the holidays for over 20 years. So we would all like some samples, Kimberly. The holidays are coming up. So if you could introduce yourself to the group tonight.
Sure. So I'm Kim Master. I work at Riot Games. I head our technology sourcing, so all the technology that we buy to support our game, data centers, servers, software, all of that good stuff. Riot Games publishes League of Legends. It's a pretty big game. I don't know if anyone. I see a lot of heads nod. That's amazing. Sometimes I say that and people just stare. They're like, I think our kids play it. That's all they say. So this is very exciting. And we have a bunch of new games that we just announced at our 10-year anniversary. So that's super exciting to see us expand our portfolio. We're finally putting the S in games. Well, before we were just Riot Game for a very, very long time.
Okay, so your first question for the evening is, what's your best career advice that you've received regarding developing what you're known for?
So it's strange because I when I think about that, like I think it's a lot of information and data beds that I've gotten over a period of time, but I think it really hit home at an ISM conference when I went to a session on branding, and she started out with create your brand, and something just clicked, and I'm like, I don't know why I had never really thought about myself and creating a brand of which to define what I do and what I stand for and who I am within the workplace. She talked a lot about like getting to your why statement. I don't know if anyone knows Simon Sinek, but this is a big topic with him as well. He's an author and speaker. But really understanding what gets you up in the morning, what fuels you, what gets you excited, and finding ways to do that in your professional life and make that connection. One of the biggest stretches for me, or at least it has been, is part of that journey is sharing your story and sharing with strangers what you want to do and what's important to you and ideas that you have, because that's where you get your allies and the people that will help you on your journey. And I'm an introvert, so that's terrifying to me. Just like sitting on this panel is a little bit terrifying. So but I love to stretch myself and do things like this and share my story with people, because that's how we get to where we want to go. Get people on board, and then once you've got your brand and you sort of know the scope of work you want to do, you got to kind of manage it, and then you make those calls about like what fits in with your brand and what doesn't, and not everything does. I love to fix things, and I love to have institutional knowledge and be the one that can go in and dissect problems and make everything clean. But I can't afford to do that at my organization, or I'll never get the larger strategic things that I want to do as a part of my brand to deliver that to the company. And so you have to learn to make those calls. So that's what I'm working on.
And what are the new games that you've released? Are
Well,
we allowed to know? Is this public?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it was amazing. It was like a big bang of an announcement. So we've got, so League of Legends is a 5-on-5 strategic game, and we've got a card game coming out. It went into open beta at our 10th year anniversary, and then I think it'll be full release next year. We've got a first-person shooter in the works for, I think, later this year. That I'm super excited. Lauren's shaking her, she works with me.
We got a fan over here.
And we've got so many more that, it starts with more details with the games that are coming out sooner and less details on the stuff that's a little further in the pipeline. There's quite a bit in the works. It blew all our minds away when they were announcing it as Rioters, so we're pretty excited.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And next we have our host, Donna. And I have to tell tell you, when Catherine and I got dropped off and were walking around, we were out looking for celebrities, and Donna said there are actually celebrities here, correct? So if you're interested, join Catherine and I afterwards, and we'll be on the hunt.
They'll be the ones being chased by the security.
Yes.
Did security leave?
So Donna has 2 rescue dogs that were adopted as a bonded pair. Donna, what are their names and what type of dogs?
So Huxley and Odie. Huxley
Okay.
is a poodle, and Odie's a wiener dog. They are polar opposites, but they can't be separated from each other. One likes to run, one likes to sleep, one likes treats, one only likes dog. They're polar opposites, but they're always together. And they've pretty much become my world since I adopted them. And they've been to the office, and everybody who's been here has kind of seen them as well. And they're both kind of little characters. I actually have an Instagram account for them if you want to follow me. It's wienerandthepoodle.com.
We should have put a photo of
I
the dog.
know. They were
Celebrities.
very interesting.
So Donna trains in Thai kickboxing for fun. And Donna, can you explain, I'm not a kickboxer, what is that?
So, to give you the whole spiel, it is the art of 8 limbs. So hands, elbows, knees, feet. You see it a lot in UFC fights. So you'll see people on the ground and they're grappling, and that's usually jiu-jitsu. But if they're standing up and throwing feet, throwing hands, throwing elbows, throwing knees, that's Muay Thai, that's kickboxing. I am of Thai descent. My parents are from Thailand. I was born here. And when I was younger, they gave me the option. They said, hey, you can learn Thai classical dancing and be graceful and beautiful, or you can learn to box. I said, I want to box. So I've been doing it pretty much off and on ever since, mainly as a way to tie back into my heritage. But I mean, it's a really great workout. Like an hour, you burn 600-800 calories if you have a horrible trainer.
Next event, we're going to have a workout class.
We can do that all day. But it's one of those things that I didn't actually realize how much it would teach me about myself. It taught me a lot of humility. I've been put in the corner by opponents that were stronger and faster than me, and mentally I wanted to give up, but there's that part of you, right? There's that heart that keeps you going when you are in a corner. And those are the kinds of things you take with you into these situations where you're like, what's the worst that can happen to me? It's not like this guy's gonna reach across and punch me in the face like I was in the ring yesterday, right? So you always walk into these situations in work where you're like, I faced down tougher things physically. Therefore, anything that's going on mentally, I can take, because I've had to, hold up with, and I fought men in the ring. My husband, he's 6'2", and I spar with him on a regular basis. When we first started, he wasn't very good. He's good now, so I don't mess around too much. But it's humbling, it's one of those things where you learn your limitations, you learn your strengths, you learn your weaknesses, and it kind of, it teaches you things in life. So if you're ever interested, please try some kind of martial art.
We'll all go on and Google some YouTube videos later.
Definitely.
So speaking of her husband, she and her hubby were married in a castle in Scotland. Wow. And she loves time travel movies and TV shows.
Right. That's tied together. So, I don't know, it's not one of our shows, so nobody around here. The show called Outlander, that's about time travel in Scotland. And the husband's not from Scotland. I'm obviously not from Scotland, although I did a DNA test and I am 4% Scottish. So more than he was. So we're like, hey, what do you want to do when we get married? So we got married 5 years ago. And it's like, hey, let's go get married in Scotland. Oh, if we're going to do Scotland, then can we do the time travel thing? And I'll wear armor, and I'm not joking. I'll wear armor, you can wear a kilt, we'll have an owl fly in, bring us our rings, we'll get a bagpipe, the whole bit, and do it in the castle. And he's like, yeah, sure, why not, let's do it. So we actually ended up doing that, but the theme music that I walked into was the theme song from the show, because I'm like that much of a geek. That's awesome. And then if any of you saw, and so we couldn't legally get married in Scotland, so we figured let's screw around with the vows, and we had an officiant who was a Shakespearean actor, and we're like, what are we gonna do with this? He's like, hey, let's do the wedding from the Game of Thrones and get married in the sight of the seven and the crone and the witch and the dun and like, okay, let's do that. So we did that, and again, kind of just had fun with it. But it was really a great adventure, and I'm glad my husband is willing to play along with all my eccentricities. And if anybody wants to see a picture of me in my armor, yes, I was wearing armor when I got married. And there is a falcon on my arm. That's right. Yeah, if I want to see those pictures, I'll show you guys later.
So the theme is everyone follow Donna on Instagram. There's a lot of exciting things to uncover.
My dogs and I
And
have
the
separate
dogs.
accounts. Yes, the dogs. They have their own account.
All right, Donna, so your first question for the evening is describe the different facets of your brand as it relates to your stakeholders, suppliers, and procurement colleagues.
Okay. So, I'm not sure. I think everybody in here is familiar with sourcing and procurement. But if you aren't, there are some CBS guests here as well. But everybody in this room is either a stakeholder, a supplier, or a procurement colleague, right? So everybody here kind of has a relationship with each other, with their suppliers, and with their stakeholders. But it's very different. Who you are when you're talking to your stakeholder is very different sometimes to who you are when you're talking to your suppliers. Those two in particular are a little bit different. But for the most part, I want to read this quote real quick. So your brand is a perception or emotion maintained by someone other than you that describes the total experience of having a relationship with you. So basically that's how you leave somebody feeling after you've met them, and then in what situations, that they're in, do you come to mind, right? So what in a word, what are you to them? So for me, that word is helpful. I'm always trying to be helpful to everyone. For my stakeholders, I solve their problems. I deal with things they don't want to deal with, whether it's a difficult supplier, with payment terms, with negotiating, a deal that they don't want to, or sometimes it's, again, what role do you want to play? I will play the counter role. You want to wear the white hat? I'll wear the black hat. I'll be the tough, you be the easy, or let's do it the other way around. It really kind of depends on what they need. And so for my stakeholders, I want to be the person they call when they need help, right? I want them to know that I can solve their issues and I can direct them to the right resource to get things solved. For suppliers, again, I wear two hats, right? I'm either there to negotiate price and terms, and I am going to be tough, and sometimes it's going to be going back and forth and really trying to work as an advocate for my stakeholder. But a lot of times I'm trying to provide guidance and help them improve their relationship, because again, if I've gotten them into the company, I've run an RFP, they've won, I kind of put my stamp of approval on them. So if they're screwing up, it doesn't look good on me. So that's one of those things where I have to advocate for them, help them, guide them, teach them how to work through all the various hoops that are CBS, help them work with all their different stakeholders. So that's something that more often than not I try to wear that hat. But if they're screwing up, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, I got to put the tough hat on and really come to them and say, look, this is what you need to do, or you're going to lose this business. And then, after that, it's all right. Here's a letter of termination. We are done. We are this. We're that. And again, trying to keep it professional, but it's not an easy task. So most of the time, again, you're trying to be helpful, and sometimes I'm helping you out the door. That might have to be what it is. And then finally, my favorite part is really my team, my colleagues, my other sourcing professionals. It's really, helping each other be better at what we do. I actually, I'm really a big supporter of mentoring. I'm a big sister in Big Brothers and Big Sisters. My little sister, who's not so little anymore, is a senior in college. I've been her big sister for 6 years. She's going to be graduating, and I don't know if I get to be her sister anymore if she graduates, but I think it moves on to something else. But again, I'm very proud of her, but I'm actually very proud to see a lot of people that I've mentored here as well. And I think I try to invest in each of them and really kind of help them be who they are. I don't try to tell them kind of cookie cutter, what they want to do, but really find out what their strengths are and be helpful in guiding them into, what they want to be and who they are. And I think that's very important as well, is what kind of lasting impression do you have on somebody, and then how do they carry your brand out into the world? I think somebody here was actually just singing my praises when we were in the ladies' room, and I was like, oh, blushing a little bit. But that's one of those things where there was somebody else in the stall, and they heard her saying these nice things about me, and that's again an extension of your brand. And that goes for everybody, right? Stakeholders, suppliers, your teams and your colleagues, is everybody carries your brand out there. So it's very important when you're talking about these to make sure that all the different facets all align to who you are.
Donna, you've mentioned you were in, you're a big sister and you've been mentoring someone for 6 years. If I were to ask her to describe your brand, what would she say?
So, that's funny because I think how I am to people I mentor is very different from how I am to, a supplier. Unless it's a supplier I'm mentoring, that's a little different. But I think, again, everybody says I'm fun, I'm a lot of fun. But I think what it is, I really invest. I really care about what each person is doing. I generally want them to succeed. And that's, what's most important. It's really being invested and being there. And, when you are there for them, they are there for you. And I think that's kind of a testament to how many are here today. And I'm kind of, touched by it. But, I really do just like, how can I help you? And at the end of the day, that's what my brand is how can I help you?
Okay. Next question is for our blockbuster blimp friend, Terry. What are some of the benefits of developing and maintaining your brand?
Oh, there's some of the top benefits are when there's an opportunity arising within your company or even without, you'll be at the top of the list for candidates pretty much automatically. And a not so great situation if your company has cutbacks and you find yourself in the market for a new career opportunity. If you have a good online branding or you're well known out in the industry, again, once you announce or put yourself out on the market, people are going to come to you and you're going to be at the top of the recruiter's list or the hiring manager's list again. That's another big benefit. Another one is, for instance, you don't have to go out and sell yourself. People are going to be seeking you out for opportunities, and therefore you don't have to try to sell yourself to them. One other good benefit is the fact that when you get assigned to another project with new stakeholders and clients, your reputation will precede you, and they're going to welcome you with open arms and be excited and have a positive attitude from day one to work with you. So that's very helpful as well. So you're not trying to build that relationship from scratch. You're already well known and they already trust you, basically. So those are some of the benefits that come with branding, and I don't know if anybody else has any other ideas that how branding has supported them.
Any examples from the audience?
Covered them all.
You were so thorough. Catherine, I want to ask you, Terry said something about the importance of building a brand so people know who you are. They know your name, they see you online, they see you present in the community. What are some things that procurement professionals can do to get their name out there in the public? Procurement people oftentimes are head down on the computer doing amazing work, but they're not always the best about bragging about themselves and putting themselves out there in front of other people.
So I think we should all be looking at Sarah Scudder to answer that question as the master networker here. No, I think it's about pushing yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. So it's putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. It's finding people that can encourage you and support you. So public speaking or speaking in front of a group is not my forte, nor is it in my comfort zone. So I told a couple of the people I work with, I'm doing this thing tonight and I'm nervous and we're gonna do it, it's gonna be amazing. And the cheerleading and support and encouragement I got from them helped me to get from nervous to really excited to come talk to you guys and to meet new people and to have interesting conversations. And then I think you also have to look around and say, who's doing this well? Like who am I connected to that is doing this in a way that means something to me or that resonates with me? And again, Sarah, the reason I'm here this week is because I wanted to learn from Sarah. I wanted some coaching around how to build my network and how to do it in an authentic way and be a bigger part of this community. So again, it's pushing yourself, it's asking other people for help, and I think you find that if you open yourself up to that kind of relationship, people want to help you. People want to help you grow and support you and like build who you are.
And just, I don't work for LinkedIn, but I'm a big LinkedIn fan. I don't get commissions or anything. But piggybacking along with what she said, find people who are doing really, really great things on LinkedIn. It's an amazing marketing vehicle for people in procurement. There's several communities, including the procurement community that Michael Shaw started, but it's a great way to interact, engage, and share ideas and build your brand. So find people that are using LinkedIn well and follow them and copy what they're doing. Get ideas from them. It's a great way to build your brand. A couple of them mentioned they're shy and public speaking isn't their favorite thing to do.
Me too, I'm an introvert. I'm not joking, I am.
And you have to show everyone your eyes. I'm looking at her sparkly shoes.
That's a thing. Do you want to know what that's for?
Yeah.
So when you're an introvert, you want people to come to you, right? It's really painful, but that's actually one of the ones I wanted to add was work a room. It's uncomfortable, but do it. But if you're kind of an introvert like me, and I know what you people who know me are thinking, I am an introvert. I always say add something that draws people to you. So wear something that people can comment on. And again, gauge it to the audience, so don't come in here with a showgirl headdress or anything. But it's like, ooh, but you'll get comments. You're like, ooh, wow, you wore that. Cool. Hey, who are you? But I think a few people commented on my shoes. That's usually one of my things. I either wear shoes or some like crazy jewelry. I actually doubled up today. But usually you'll get somebody, oh, I really like your necklace. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Donna, right? And that's one of those things where it's very easy to just kind of an ice-breaking item. So, it doesn't have to be crazy. But again, like I could have worn my armor and y'all would have been like, why are you wearing armor? That's really cool. But, it's a thing. It breaks the ice, right? And so as somebody who was naturally introverted, I discovered that a lot of these tools, flair, whatever you want to call it, can attract people and give them an opening to come and talk to you. So again, next time I'll wear the armor.
And Catherine has cool shoes on too. You have to check out her blue shoes.
I'm not gonna. I'll do a Hanson later. You guys. And I think to add to that too, I do feel like there's a subtle strength that women have in connecting in that way. Like I would be more than happy to come up and say your shoes are amazing. Let's discuss them. And it's just a different way to build a connection and use it to your advantage.
And I'll piggyback another example. So I'm in the print and marketing services space in procurement, and that's kind of boring. And how can you build a brand and get your name out there? And so my team and I all bought newspaper print outfits. So some of you may have seen me out and about at conferences and events, and I didn't wear it tonight, but normally I have like 5 or 6 outfits in my closet and they're all newspaper print. And when we go out to events and conferences and there's 5 or 6 of us, people come up to us non-stop and say, oh my gosh, I love your outfit. What do you guys do? Tell me about your company. And as Donna said, we're not even having to talk or bring up anything. They're coming to us and asking us. So simple things, and I mean, we went on Amazon, my leggings are $12. I mean, this doesn't need to be expensive, but it's something that's creative and makes you stand out. I was wearing one of my outfits last week and a woman in the airport came up and kept touching me because she thought I was actually wearing newspaper.
That's a good one, right?
So Kimberly, you've done a lot in your career. You've worked for several different brands. Talk a little bit about how your brand has evolved. I think where we are in our 20s is very different than where we are in our 30s and 40s and 50s, and we all evolve as personal people. We all evolve in our professional lives as well. So talk to us about how it's evolved, and if you have any tips for the group about what they can do to make sure they're continuously enhancing their brand.
My brand has definitely become bolder as I've become more experienced and more aged. I spent a lot of time in my younger career beating my head against the wall trying to conform and fit in and all of that, and it was all very frustrating. I don't know if anyone's aware, but Riot was going through some D&I efforts recently. We were looking for diversity on our board of directors, in fact, and we got this this wonderful board of directors, Young Mi Moon, and she's an author, And she wrote a book called Different. It's about marketing, actually. I don't know if you guys have read it, but I took it on a vacation read, and it really resonated with me, and I wanted to share it with you guys a little bit, because she talks about how we used to do performance reviews, right? There'd be these pillars that everybody needs to conform to, and you would get the low marks around the things that you weren't doing well, and that would be the focus of the performance review. But what we're not doing is putting all of that energy into the things that we are doing well. This isn't to say that that's not important, that's subjective, but like she's saying, because we're focusing on making everything equal, we're actually creating this really bland atmosphere where everyone conforms and is just a commodity. And it resonated with me because I'm like, that's why we need brands. We need to be accentuating those unique qualities and traits that make us special when we're out there in the workforce and differentiate ourselves from everybody else. I learned to stop feeling bad for not checking a box. And I learned to lean in more authentically to things that felt good to me and not feel apologetic for it. And that was really powerful. I had an experience where somebody came to me and sought me out for a job opportunity. It was like a big title, a lot of money. I was like, wow, me? This is amazing. And then I was talking to them and I'm like, this doesn't sound fun at all. You guys don't know what you want. I don't know whether you're hiring an engineer or a technology sourcing person. And I had some questions because I was really curious, like where they were going with, the recruiter was going with all the questions, and I finally said, I have to bow out. It doesn't really feel like this is a good fit. And they had turned from like being kind of cool to me, like, no, but we really want you. And I'm like, no, this isn't gonna work. But it was empowering for me, because that was the moment when I realized I know my brand, and I know where I work well, and I know where I don't play well. I actually don't know what like a director of strategic sourcing for technology looks like the perfect one. I can only speak to what I look like in that position and the things that I do that make me good at that role. So be yourself.
Name of the book one more time in case we all want to go online and order it later.
Yeah, it's called Different, and I actually highly recommend it. It's a short read. But it's very fascinating. Performance reviews is not the bulk of the book. That was just a snippet that
Don't
really
get scared.
Yeah, it wasn't what resonated. It was just the part that really resonated with me. But it also talks about marketing and the lack of innovation that we're seeing out in the world today, because everybody's competing with each other, which is actually holding back innovation. It's a great read.
So one of the things I get asked a lot is, well, isn't it really conceited or egotistical if I want to put myself out there and build a brand? So Catherine, what are your thoughts about creating a brand? Should people be concerned about being known as cocky or overconfident? How do you kind of mix and match between building a brand and not being too self-confident?
Sure. So I'm in a program right now, a Women in Leadership program, where we were having a conversation last week, and Sarah's question made me think about this conversation, where a lot of the women, and we all come from different backgrounds, different experiences, different places in our careers, but the overwhelming theme was like, how do I get a seat at the table, and how do I make it meaningful? And I thought about that a lot, and I have conversations with some of my coworkers who are a little bit earlier on in their careers, and we talk about like aggressive versus advocating versus assertive. And if you think about the women you know, I think you know plenty of women, all of you included, that do really good work. And you expect your work to speak for itself, right? You expect your peers and your managers, your leaders, to say, that person's doing an amazing job, I see her, and she's gonna get all the things she deserves. And then you look at some of your male peers, and obviously there are exceptions to every rule, but you look at some of your male peers, and they don't have a problem saying, I did this really good thing, because I did this really good thing. and I want to do more of that really good thing. So this is what I'm going to do, and how are you going to help me get there? So I see that the way I want to think about it is kind of changing the narrative from like assertive or aggressive to advocating. So if you're not doing it for yourself, nobody's going to do it for you. So I don't think it's too bold or too anything. I think it's what you have to do to get yourselves a seat at the table.
Does anyone in the audience have any examples of where they've should have been bolder than they were, or an example where they were bold and it really worked out well?
Well, I am an undergrad at USC, and I applied to 31 schools for undergrad right out of high school, and I sat in a meeting with my college counselor who told me that I shouldn't apply to USC because it was likely I wasn't going to get in. And Donna over there is a Trojan as well. And I had another college counselor who said, go ahead and apply. The worst that can happen is that they say no. And I kind of had to tell myself, like, it's going to be one more application that I'm going to have to write, another essay, a couple more essays, but I know that I'm meant to be there. I'm going to go to SC, and I'm good enough for SC. And I will be graduating 2021 in May.
So I think you need to mail that counselor something when you graduate.
I should.
A photo of you with her.
her. She gave me a big hug and said she was really proud of me. And I said, I'm proud of you too.
Good example, thank you. Any other stories from the audience? Yes, in the back?
Actually, just to piggyback off that.
Do you mind saying your name and company?
Yes, so my name is Jeanette. I am an associate general counsel at a company called Global Food Group. I was actually an intern of Donna's, and I have to say, like, piggybacking off that story, I went to UC Davis. It was the only college I applied to for undergrad. It's the only one I got into because it's the only one I applied to. But I was told by a community college professor that I would never make it out of community college and I would never get to Davis. And so I made that my absolute goal to get there. And as I found throughout my life, like, not only was I motivated by the people who told me I couldn't, I was motivated by people like Donna who told me I could and, like, helped me a lot. And so I think it's important, you know, especially when you're still trying to figure out where you're going, to just, you know, keep, even if, because I'm an introvert too, and I don't seek out social interaction, I don't seek out networking, but it's good to, like, really just keep putting yourself out there, and, like, there are people who want to help you, there are people who are always going to be able to say, hey, like, I was there where you were, let me help you along the way. And I think it's important to, as, you know, as part of your brand, I think the how can I help you is just who I've become, because I didn't really know where I was going, and I think that's also an important thing.
A theme I'm hearing is don't always listen to your counselor.
Very
And work for Donna.
And we're going to
Work for Donna, don't listen to your counselor. Any other stories that anyone wants to share where they should have been more bold, or they were bold and it worked out well for them?
But I mean, I want to ask why, you know, men aren't asking these questions. You know, men aren't asking, you know, why aren't I bolder? They don't even think about these things. So why are we thinking about these things? Why aren't we just, you know, again, proud of what we do, comfortable talking about what we do, and, you know, putting ourselves out there? And that's a challenge, I think, as women to change that dynamic of feeling, you know, uncomfortable with these things. I mean, it's not that hard for, you know, for us to just, again, networking is uncomfortable, but just stick your hand out and say, hi, my name is Donna. What's the worst the person's going to do? They're not going to punch you in the face. You know, again, I go to that analogy a lot, and so it's always one of those things. What's the worst that can happen? They're not going to punch you in the face. That's never happened. But you know, that's something I would challenge everybody here to think about is, you know, as women, why are we worried about these things? Well, maybe we shouldn't be worried about these things anymore.
So Donna, I have a question for you. When I talk to women and men, a challenge that often comes up is first impressions. When you meet someone for the very first time, whether it's in person and now online, is a huge way that we make first impressions. Some people are really timid and shy about making the wrong first impression. What are some do's and don'ts you have for the group about people making that first impression and making it a good one?
So We're talking about a lot of different situations, right? In a group setting like this versus, you know, a one-on-one interview or you know, discussion. But in everything, it's really about matching that person's level, right? If you walk in, hey, how are you? What are you doing today? And the other person's like, I'm fine, thank you. I mean, you know, it's a thing, right? Then they're gonna think you're an absolute nut. So, and people often think I am. But every trait and every aspect has two sides to the coin, right? Somebody who's very driven can be seen as very aggressive. Somebody who's very friendly can be perceived as annoyingly in your face, right? So it's like making sure whatever you do isn't too much of something. And how do you gauge what is too much? You kind of read it off of the person. Now, in a big group setting like this, yeah, you can be yourself, and you'll probably, you know, people who are big and loud and boisterous might be drawn to more big and loud and boisterous people. But, you know, again, I would challenge everybody to kind of put yourself out there and at least be even and put, you know, stick your hand out and introduce yourself, right? But I wanted to tell a story, and I call this the tractor beam handshake. And you know, when you're at these things, there are people that you want to meet, and there's people who want to meet you. And I was walking by, and this woman sticks her hand out, and of course I'm a polite person, so I grab her hand and say, oh, hello, you know, it's nice to meet you, da-da-da-da-da. And she grabs my hand, and she doesn't let go. And she puts this death grip on it, and then she pulls me in like a tractor beam. And she's, and I'm like, give me my, and she's, hi, da-da-da, and she's doing her whole, you know, like elevator pitch, and she's, the whole time she's got my hand, and all I can think of is, give me my hand back later. and you know, and she's talking, and she's like, hi, oh, I really want to meet you, and da-da-da, I have a company, I do this, and I do that, and da-da-da-da-da, and she's just got this death grip on me, and I understand that she's being, you know, assertive and aggressive, and she wants to get my business, but nowadays, if I see her I stay out of arm's reach. Oh hello, you get away. And that's too much, right? It's too much. But if she had shook my hand and said hello, how are you? I would have taken her card, and you know, I probably would have had a dialogue. But now it's like, if I let you in my office, what are you gonna do? You know, that was a really bad first impression because it was too much. And it was very aggressive, but maybe it works. Maybe she, you know, she pulls in enough people, somebody's gonna bite, right? So it's a thing that you know. Oh, she's not here. But you know, it's one of those things where you want to make sure that the people you're engaging with are comfortable with you, right? And a lot of times it's as procurement people, everybody wants something from us sometimes, you know, especially suppliers that are coming and they want to do business and they want to do business. And a lot of times it's, well, what can you do for me to be helpful? So I'm always really, I stay in contact with the suppliers that, hey, Donna, did you know there's a new legislation coming out for da-da-da-da-da, and I know I'm not your supplier, but if your supplier, you know, you should talk to your supplier about it. That wasn't any business for them, but it did build them, you know, equity in my books. And so in their, you know, the brand for them was they were helpful to me, and maybe someday, hey, if I have an opportunity, I'm gonna keep you in mind. So it's what did that person do for me that made me keep them in mind? So it's, again, you know, be helpful, maintain that same level, and just really don't do something crazy. Just don't be a crazy person, unless you're, again, in a room full of crazy people. Then go ahead, go to town, be crazy.
Everyone, work on your handshakes tonight.
Tractor beam.
You grab and then release.
That's right.
Yes.
Catch and release. But a good handshake, no limp handshakes either. We don't like those either.
Kimberly, another big topic in branding is the idea of your reputation. And what are you known for? When you're not in the room, what are other people saying about you? And what do you do when your reputation is out of alignment with what your brand should be?
So that could be a lot of things. It could be big things like maybe you're just not in alignment with your organization and where you want to go. It could be small things like there was a miscommunication or a bad email that was sent that sort of set someone off. I think staying, trying to remain objective, which is sometimes hard to do when, you know, you hear things that are being said about you or remarks that are made about your reputation. But if you can stay objective and go to the source, please just go to the source. Don't feed it. Don't do anything. Just go to the where it came from. If you don't know, then you can kind of do a survey and find out, you know, how people are perceiving you. And when you do have that conversation, which I do, right? Like I work at a gaming company, it's chaotic. There's a lot going on and competing priorities and pivots on what people are working on, and it creates some confusion. And I'm looking at someone who maybe just doesn't even understand my role, and they're kind of miffed because they don't think I'm doing my job, what they think my job is. Well, hear them out, just listen to them. And find that, and one trick is just 2% truth. Whatever they say, there's 2% truth in there somewhere, and if you can find that and relate with it and be like, okay, and then you've got something to work from as a base. For the most part, that works really great. But I definitely think you need to have, like, quick, you nip it in the bud, you have the conversation, clear it up, go in there with the assumption that we're all good people, we're all trying to get the same thing done, not be defensive, not be offensive, and just have a really good communication.
Any reputation stories that someone in the audience wants to share? An experience that they've had?
So I think that sometimes people who, you know, they think they're one way, but they're perceived another way, are not very self-aware. You know, I have an experience with someone who, you know, greatest person in the world. I know her. She's like really a genuine person, but she has no filter, and so she says stuff that's really, that she means well when she says it, but it comes out very like, rude or like tactless, and it's one of those things, and it's like, and she can't understand why people, don't like her. And it's what, or why people, misunderstand. And it's like, well, again, you mean well, but these people don't know you well enough, and they just, think you're being rude, where you really just have no filter. And again, I we were talking about Kimberly's gotten bolder and more outward with her brand. I've actually toned down because I had no filter early on either. And I get it from my family because my grandma has no filter. She's like, oh, you're too fat, you're too skinny, that kind of thing. But it comes from a place of love, right? And so sometimes you're trying to help somebody, and if you're a very direct person, you're just going to say, oh no, your paper was terrible, or no, that that was very poorly written. And sometimes you have to be, tactful, and maybe you're not self-aware when you're trying to be direct, and especially sourcing people, right? A lot of times we're trying to get to the point. And sometimes it's like we don't have time for niceties, but it's one of those things where if you're being perceived a certain way, think about how you're saying what you're saying, and how other people who may not be logical Vulcans, or somebody who isn't as empathetic might perceive you. So I see that a lot.
I think we need to help each other out and give each other a heads up when we see something that we know is not really what that person wants to project. I've had people do it for me in the past. While painful in the moment, they were 100% correct, and I'm ever so thankful that they said something.
I think the flip side of that is also like, know who you are and own it. So I like to get personal information about people. I don't keep a lot close to the vest. So I know this about myself, and it's something I have to pull in. Like, I like to push people a little bit further than they kind of want to go with like intimate conversation, and I want to know more about them. I want to know who they are, but like I'll also call that out and say like, I kind of have no boundaries, and I want to know everything about you. So like, are we here? Are we on the same page or no?
You get that nosy, right?
Yeah, I'm a little nosy, and I'll give the same amount of information to people, and I hope I get it back from them. But I can kind of meet them where they are. But I do think
overshare.
I'm an overshare. But I think naming it, calling it what it is also really helpful. So, yeah.
So, Terry, I have a question for you, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So if you guys have questions for any of the panelists, get them ready to go. We've talked a lot about branding in the corporate world, but there's also personal branding as well. How our family perceives us, how our friends perceive us. Is one better or more important than the other?
I don't think that one is more important than the other. For tonight's purposes, I think we're more focused on our professional branding. But I think that if you're just now thinking about your brand and how you want to approach it, and you don't have any idea on how to do that, going back to Catherine's opening remarks about personal branding and values, I think that's a good place to start. Your personal values are who you truly are, and they're easier for you to identify. And this is one way for you, one avenue to start building your brand and getting a foundation, is starting with your personal values and brand, and from that you can build it into your professional branding, because your personal values and brand is going to naturally flow over into your professional, because that's who you are. And with that foundation, and then identifying your professional brand with that as your basis, I think it's a good start to begin to develop your brand. That's just one approach.
So with that, we're gonna open it up to the audience for any questions. We've talked a lot about reputation. Yes?
I have a question. So your brand, as you guys have learned and grown and evolved through your career, do you actually write out your brand? Have you dedicated time to thinking about your brand? Do you have a vision board? Are there any tools? You know, my brand has a lot bouncing around in my head, but I haven't actually physically written anything, speaking it into existence.
And do you mind sharing your name and company?
Oh, sorry, sure, yes. My name is Liz Pinnell. I work for Hydrofacial in Long Beach in MPI Procurement.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I have written mine out, and it's not I did this very recently, so it's kind of cheating at this answer, but as part of this program I'm doing, there was something about your story and what your brand and what your values are, so it kind of forced me to sit down and think about what that was for me. It's always like floating around, but something I kind of solidified recently.
So while I don't have mine written out, I do have a fairly, solid LinkedIn presence, and I didn't want to be all over the place, because I am multifaceted, and I'm very different from different engagements. So I really try to zero in on my brand. What do I want to stand for, right? So I really want to stand for empowerment and diversity, and I also want to support environmental sustainability and environmental initiatives. So I really kind of focused on those two items on my LinkedIn presence, and then of course, professionally, from a sourcing perspective, all the different areas that I cover. I actually end up doing a lot more stuff around diversity and sustainability and advocacy than I actually do for sourcing and the commodities that I manage, which is the content commodities. Mainly because, again, I think the content area is saturated. There's tons of people, right? So you're not necessarily going to differentiate yourself as a category procurement person, but you might differentiate yourself as a category procurement person who specializes in supplier diversity or sustainability, or finding suppliers within your category for those areas. So it's really what benefit and value add, let's call it what it is in the sourcing room here. What value add do you have other than what you do, right? So think about that as your brand and your identity, and that's kind of what I put myself out for. So sourcing, great. You want to talk to Donna for marketing, production, post-production, great. But you can talk to anybody for that, right? But it's the other things. What else do you bring to your table? And a lot of times you can
sparkly shoes,
right? You can tie that into what you're passionate about, and what you really care about.
I don't have it written down. I'm a grasshopper in this, apparently. I got on this panel and I went online to Google myself to see what does the internet think my brand is, and
that's a good exercise, actually.
You'll find my LinkedIn profile and then Kimberly, Master Pokemon Trainer. It wasn't like Kimberly Master, it's just Kimberly, who is a master. That's not even mine. It's impressive though, if you do.
So excited to meet you.
I've never played it. Never played. But what I do hold very fiercely is what I stand for at work and the principles that I like to carry and how I do my job. And I'll challenge things that don't feel like they fit and what's authentic to me and feels good and the right thing to do for my partners and for finance and for the company as a whole. And because I speak about it a lot, that is when I'm very vocal, is when I'm challenging something. It's kind of gotten beaten into me to the point where I can rattle it off, and I've probably got 4 or 5 decks on my computer that I can go through with someone. And so that's about as far as I've got. Every year I like to think about what my next year is going to look like. I'm working on that. That I do write down.
And that's a good reminder for all of us to go Google ourselves online and see what comes up. Sometimes you might be happy, and sometimes, wow, maybe I have some work to do.
Manufacturer. Somebody with my name manufactures specialty surfboard or something. I was like, oh, great.
All right, thank you for the question. Anyone else have a question for our esteemed panel this evening? Name and company, or?
Yeah, I'm an undergrad at USC, and my name is Grace Underwood, and I'm currently in the position of shifting the trajectory of my career path. And I'm wondering, my personal brand has shifted a lot over the past few years. I'm wondering what advice you women have when searching for a job, especially when you're shifting what you initially thought you were going to college for, and now it's changed. What advice you guys have with finding a company that aligns with your own personal brand?
There's probably a reason you changed, right? And there's probably a connection you feel to what you changed to. Mm-hmm. So I would lean into that and share that passion. It's funny when you think of, I had an analogy I was thinking of, and I hadn't really fully developed it, but I'm going to give it a shot. So imagine you've got a salesperson that's in your office, and they're trying to sell you something, and they're not very connected to the product, and they're just going through like brochures and the materials, and you're like, oh, okay, great, that sounds good. Yay for print. And then imagine you have that company's founder in your office, and they're talking about their product that they raised, that they're passionate about, and the energy that comes with that. And I think if you treat yourself like you're your own founder and you talk about your passion and what your connection is, people will pick up on that energy, and I think that that's really impactful.
I like that, be your own founder. It's a good Twitter quote.
Maybe I can get that in my Google search.
Thank you for that question. Barb, did you have a question in the front?
So I would love to hear from each of you, who has been your greatest advocate as a woman in procurement?
And Barb, what company are you with?
I'm with Omnia Partners, Barb Sexton.
I'll start. I have to say that throughout my career, I actually fell into sourcing and contracting. It wasn't anything that I had a goal to do when I fell into it. And I've been lucky that my leadership has always been my biggest advocate. And I know a lot of people that I've met throughout my career and throughout my life didn't have that much luck that I did. So when you are interviewing at a company, you need to interview who is going to be your boss and your mentor, just as much as they're interviewing you. You have to know that they're going to be an advocate for you and help you grow and get you, help you meet your goals. So where you're at today, from your last question, as you're interviewing, really interview them back and know that what they're proposing to you is what you want to do, and that they want to help you get to that next level and catapult you from there.
So male or female, your leadership?
They have all been male. All of my, most of my career has been in very heavily male-dominated industries: mining, oil and gas,
insurance,
yeah, even now, insurance. So I think I've only had one female boss and she was amazing. But then she went to the other side. She went to the dark side, our client side, and became a different person. So, no, but she was great though, and she was my actual boss, and she was wonderful. But 9 out of 10 have been male.
So I probably come at this from a little bit of a different lens as a marketer. So marketing, I have worked with a handful of men, but most of the people that I've worked for or that have worked for me have been women. But I think it's generally always been from my leadership, and it's been people, it's been my managers saying, like, know what you're famous for. What are you famous for? What do you want to be famous for? And let's really capitalize on that. And pushing me to be a little bit better than I am presently. Currently, I have 2 men that I work for that I kind of, if they're watching, they're both my bosses. But both of them knew I was doing this today, and I got some really nice words of encouragement from them. And they've been huge advocates and huge supporters. So I think, it's just, I think I found a way to engage with them where I'm like, this is me, this is what I want, this is what I'm trying to do, and like, let's work together on this.
So I sat here and I thought about it. It's like, well, various people have been supportive, but then I thought, well, who really told me I could do it? And my answer is me. And again, I make no apologies for that. And it's one of those things where, look, there were things that need to be done, and nobody's doing it, I'll do it. And it's one of those things, well, why can't I do it? And nobody else is doing it, and it needs to be done, so I'll do it. And then I'll step up and say, hey, nobody was doing this, so I did this. And most of the time, people I reported to said, great, thank you, continue to do it. And so, and again, if you continue to do all these things that need to be done, there's a recognition that comes with it. And then, of course, you say, well, I'm doing all these things, and these things are a senior position. I'm deserving of a senior position. And again, you advocate for yourself. And that's, been a big thing for me. And again, I've worked with people who have been very supportive, but I think the reason behind, their recognition is that I saw something that needed to be done, and I said, why can't I do it? Why shouldn't I do it? And so again, and it's one of those things where, again, why are we as women concerned that, hey, well, that was really egotistical of you to say, no, it wasn't, I did it. So I think it's okay to say, that yeah, I was my biggest advocate. So there's that.
All right, we'll close out with Kimberly.
The closer. This is exciting.
No pressure.
So most of my leadership has been male. I haven't had a lot of, given the statistics, I don't think that's a really big surprise, unfortunately.
Right.
We're going to change that. And similar to Donna, I got into procurement because we needed someone to do something, and I'm like, I can do that. And then I continued to do it, and the company grew. It was with Open Table. The company grew, and the need became more complex, and I'm like, well, this feels like a thing that I'm doing. So there's got to be other people who know how to do this, and there's a better way to do it. Got connected with ISM. I started researching, and so I go to the CFO. I'm like, I think I'm going to do a spend analysis. And he's like, cool, sounds awesome. So, for the most part, it's been just really supportive leadership that have been open to allow me to go outside my bubble, right? Or to create my own bubble, if you will, and explore different things that I wanted to explore. But then there's the fight of like, hey, I did all of these things, and this is how much that compensation should look like, and you have to advocate for yourself because you got to be a little scrappy. That's the reality of it, and really advocate for yourself and be your own founder. Yeah.
The hustle is real.
Yeah, the hustle is definitely real.
So we are actually over time. I want to thank all of you very, very much for taking an evening to come out to CBS and spend time with the group. Thank you all to our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. These women were picked because they all have very unique, interesting stories and backgrounds, and they are incredible people to approach So I encourage you to come up afterwards and get their business cards, connect with them on LinkedIn, ask for their advice. They are up here for a reason, so don't let them run away without getting some words of wisdom from them. Michael, I want to thank you again for helping bring the group together.
Yes, thank you.
Moderator.
Yes.
Happy to be here. We are doing several national events next year, so stay tuned. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have a schedule posted. If you guys enjoyed being here today and want to get more involved with the Women in Procurement group and attend more of our national events, I know we have Barb here who's getting super involved, and I'm excited to work with you. So information coming out soon about that. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share the calendar and schedule as we have it ready. There is lots of food in the back, so take to-goes, grab some more snacks. There's also desserts, so make yourselves comfortable and finish your networking for the evening. So with that,
Join the group on LinkedIn.
yes. Thank you.